Alright, so at this point, now we're ready to finish up with some of the final detail work on this Rhino's texture. Alright, so here's where we left off. Now, looking at this Rhino, overall, you can see that we have now quite a bit of detail that we've managed to paint within this overall color map, or this poly painting. Now, the one thing that we do need to do, looking at this, is you can see that we do have a lot of wrinkling and a lot of these skin textures that we have that's been sculpted in, but they're not really contained in any way on the texture map. So to illustrate that, a good way of seeing exactly what your texture map looks like without the involvement of any shadowing or shading is to switch your material to this flat color shader. Alright, so with this flat color shader, you can see we don't have any sort of shadow or highlight contribution. It's just 100% flat, and lets us see exactly what the texture itself looks like. Now you can see that within this texture, we don't have any of those skin wrinkles or any of those skin details contained in this. So that's what we want to do in this lesson. So previously, this was something that was very, very difficult to do within Zbrush, the ability to actually capture these types of wrinkles inside of a color map. But in ZBrush 3, there's a new feature called cavity masking, and we're going to utilize that to actually paint these deep wrinkles into the map itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is come in here, pick a color off of our Rhino's body. Let's take this color and dock this over here. We'll make the color a little bit darker so that we can actually follow along with this. So that way it just gets knocked down a little bit more. Just a slightly darker version of the overall skin color. Okay. And so now, if we go over to this menu on the side, and underneath masking, we have an option that is mask by cavity. So if you click on this, you can see what will happen is it will go through and pretty much mask out all of these little deep areas. So if I turn off my Z intensity, give it a little bit of RGB intensity, and very quickly paint this, you can see that what we wind up with is those areas were masked out, and so I was able to come in and paint that into the color map itself. Alright, so that's the basic workflow that we're going to utilize for this. We'll mask by cavity, let it mask out. Let's switch to a nice low RGB intensity so we can paint through this. Maybe even a little bit lower than that. And with a nice large brush, we'll come through and paint this over. And actually, before I do that, let me come back and just undo these last couple of strokes. Alright, so I'll just undo it back to the point where we no longer have that particular stroke there. Alright, so let's go ahead and move out and start to paint this in. So we'll try to go over this really lightly because I don't want this to be too terribly dark as far as this overall skin shading goes, these little cracks and crevices and these cavities. So we could run over several of these areas a few times if we want to be able to darken these up particularly. So we'll run through here, fill these out, and I like to come in and do a lot of these by hand, so that way they're not 100% the same color. And we could use the fill command and fill all these in with the exact same color in one shot, but usually I find it to be a little bit more natural if we can get a little bit of color variation, similar to what we did throughout the rest of the body inside these cavities. Okay, let's come in and get some of these cavities up around the face as well. So we'll paint some of these in. Nice light brush strokes, again, just so that this is fairly subtle as far as its coloring goes. Okay, let's take a look at that. Alright, very nice. So now we have a little bit of this wrinkle map that's actually contained inside the texture itself. And we can always come back and make further modifications to that. If we decide we want to come in and mask a little bit more, we can feel free to come back and run over this as many times as we decide to. So let's maybe come back a little bit more, fill in some of these areas that didn't quite get filled in so well. Come in and grab some of these areas around the face, as well as a few of these areas down around throughout the body. And just to change things up, we could always come in and darken some of these up a little bit more, so that in a few of these areas we have a little bit of color variation in the actual cavities. So maybe a few of these cavities get masked out a little bit darker than others. And we could always come back, maybe add a little bit more intensity to some of these areas. So we can come in, paint with a few of these little softer strokes. You get in a little tighter on this head area. Add a few of these strokes that can run around this way. Let's get down here underneath the face and paint in some of these cavities as well. Okay, let's take a look at that. Let's unmask this. Alright, and there's our color map. You can see what this looks like on our object. Alright, very nice. And you can see how that adds just that little extra bit of definition through some of these skin areas. Okay? So now that we have this set up and we have these maps that are pretty much in place, what we'll start to do in the next lesson is begin the process of exporting some of the various color, normal, and displacement maps.